Welcome to Taiwan Day. I'm delighted to share with you my thoughts and perspectives on how imperative it is for us all to collaborate in order to ascertain net zero by year 2050. In the interdependent world we live in and thrive on today, we must realize that regardless of how large or small a brain company or a manufacturing enterprise you are, or how small or large, and perhaps how rich and poor a country you are, we must closely and seamlessly collaborate. For that, we believe no one can do it alone. And as we collaborate to put our commitment into actions, we must be mindful and also must try to ensure that no one should be left behind, especially the less fortunate citizens and poverty-stricken communities at the micro level. And at the macro level, the more vulnerable developing and underdeveloped countries. What are the motivational and aspirational factors behind CC4CC Dialogues and Initiatives? At its core, circular economy is about redesigning our society to be regenerative with zero externalities, and steadily replaced the degenerative form of linear economy. The first objective is to reverse the negative impacts from the century-long linear economic model. It is to be a reflection on how we have tolerated an economic model based on the destructive value system. The destructive value system of privatizing profits and benefits while publicizing costs and risks. This value system have created havoc on our planet, on our overall livelihood during the past 100 years. The second objective is to ensure our readiness for the uncertainties and challenges that lies ahead. Uncertainties and challenges that are likely to emerge in the next 30 years, leading to year 2050. Finally, it's about the need to step up, to take ownership or the responsibility of this imminent crisis. A quote from US former President J.F. Kennedy: "If not me, who? And if not now, when?" I think it says it all. We must do all we can to leave a better world to our children and their children. It is no longer a choice, but a must. Let's now take a look at how CC4CC is defined. As a definition, CC4CC are dialogues or initiatives, a set of action plans which are collectively developed to capture the philosophies, principles, and practices of the regenerative, restorative, and the resilient circular economy. It is a structural solution and a key transitional strategy to ascertaining net zero and mitigating climate crisis. Circular economy differs from today's linear economy in many ways, and some of the differences can best be manifested in three integrated facets. First, it's about redefining future needs of consumers, of users on the demand side. From the very traditional ownership-driven to usage-driven of products. Generally, we refer that to as product as a service. Second, it is about ensuring the highest value utilization for all resources by eradicating waste and emissions of all forms. This differs from the linear model, where waste, emissions, accidents are regarded as norms, as long as they are kept at so-called acceptable level. Thirdly, it is about forging a seamless and symbiotic relationships among all stakeholders with all-inclusive wins, or system collaboration, as we refer it to. This again is in contrast with the linear model, where win-lose is a commonly accepted or again tolerated commercial arrangements. While we are on the subject of responsibility, much of the blame for carbon emissions have actually fallen on the shoulders of product manufacturers or production-based countries. In reality, however, net zero is too important a topic, actually leaving it to one nation or one company to resolve. And as I said earlier, no one can do it alone. Let's have a look at an example that is closer to home here in Scotland, the Scotch whiskey industry. By the way, Taiwan is the leading importer of Scotch whiskey. On the average, around 2.5 to 3 million cases of Scotch whiskey are consumed every year here in Taiwan. Everyone along the whiskey supply chain are both the contributors of the carbon emissions or externalities. But these people, they are also the benefactors of the tangible and intangible benefits of this fine Scotch. So who is responsible for the externalities or carbon footprints? Notwithstanding the fact that Scotch whisky associations have indeed been aggressive in reducing carbon emissions, like investing in anaerobic digestion plants, biomass, hydrogen energy, packaging roadmaps, peat action plans, etc. However, it is most clear that no one can do it alone in attaining net zero. Instead, all stakeholders along the supply chain are responsible and should do their part of the damaging. In short, with all the carbon emissions wrapped up into the Scotch bottle, and as Taiwanese Scotch lovers take a sniff and a sip of the whiskey from the tiny tumbler, such as this one here. This is filled with Scotch whiskey. The consumers are also responsible for carbon reduction, and so do all Scotch lovers from other nations. The responsibility shouldn't be left alone to the Scotch distillers. It is in this vein all other agricultural products like fish, oysters, beef, and pork, and of course, also all industrial products like the clothes we wear, the textiles, ICT products manufactured, especially here in Taiwan. We must not single out the Taiwanese OEMs, the manufacturers, for the responsibility of carbon emission. Instead, we must go beyond holding only the Scotch and Taiwanese product manufacturers responsible for carbon emission, to no fault of many vulnerable, less or underdeveloped nations. They have fallen victims to the actions or perhaps inactions of other more developed and developing nations. As we speak, rising sea level are threatening the livelihood of many island nations, and climate irregularities are affecting many agricultural-based nations. Further, many studies have also shown much of the poverties surrounding us and the equality or inequality surrounding us are results of our current form of degenerative economic model. Therefore, let's not squander another crisis. Let's make use of the crisis, leverage on the crisis. We should take the opportunity to ensure no one should be left behind. In other words, we believe defending the underdogs is the rule and is our collective duty. Finally, there are two thoughts I wish to leave them with you. As we are racing with the time, against the time, we must do everything we can to accelerate our agenda. However, I am most fearful the agreement to reduce carbon footprint at all the COP events may be compromised by other trade and economic agreements. The first UNFCCC's COP meeting to mitigate climate crisis was held 20 years ago, or actually 26 years ago, in Germany in 1995. Parallel to the COP conferences, also taking place are many bilateral, multilateral economic dialogues amongst nations and trade organizations. However, ever since then, these dialogues, for the most part, remain business as usual and continue to thrive in the shadow of the traditional linear economic model and principles. As a result, and somewhat perhaps ironic, that these dialogues were successfully agreed upon, and if they were successfully agreed upon, they would actually yield opposing and conflicting results. This is the irony. Higher level of carbon emission would in fact contradict with the net zero goals of UNFCCC COP's initiatives. The chart on the right indicating that the UN's by-country NDC, or nationally determined contribution, with all its good intention, calling for each country to commit to carbon reduction, has not really yielded satisfactory results. With the exception of only a number of countries, the combined reduction by the developed nations over the last 15 to 20 years is incremental in comparison to the quantum increase of carbon footprints by the carbon production nations like India, Vietnam. We like to encourage COP, COP, and other trade economic dialogues to adopt and institutionalize CC4CC dialogues and initiatives. This would prevent environment ambitions come in conflict with the goals agreed upon by the Trade Economic Forum, be it bilateral or multilateral discussions. Again, since no single country or company can ascertain net zero by itself, COP can bring together the production-based and consumption-based nations together to explore mutually beneficial strategies or arrangements to collectively attain net zero. And further, also to bring the developed nations with developing and the more vulnerable low-income underdeveloped nations together to address the crisis many of the vulnerable, less developed nations are facing. Let's move on to the second suggestion. The second suggestion is that we ought to acknowledge that the existing global supply chain, as it existed today, is perhaps structurally flawed. In the linear design supply chain, it is easy to pass the buck or the responsibility from one to the next. For example, Taiwanese OEMs, in order to qualify to be a certified vendors, or major brand owners stipulates their OEM partners for ESG compliance. This will require significant investments to be made by OEM suppliers. And one would surmise that once OEM suppliers are in compliance with ESG requirements and brand owners are ready for manufacturing their products, may still opt to qualify and select the OEMs with the lowest bid price. This cycle is a linear cycle. The win-lose linear model will repeat itself. In short, while investing in ESG will indeed reduce each product's carbon footprint, but as long as the major brand owners continue to launch their products for what I call quick obsolescence and accelerate their marketing and sales initiatives to entice their consumers to buy more and consume fast, the prospect for total carbon reduction will be deemed and seem unlikely. To resolve the ironies between companies in this so-called linear supply chain, the best to do is to create a new network of supply chains. We refer to it as the regenerative form and regionalized circular service network. And with this, we can gradually replace these degenerative linear supply model. Globalized linear supply chain is an open-ended with high level of dispersed externalities and carbon emissions. It is fragmented, with each stakeholders vying for their existence and survival. Because the chain is the direct product of linear economy, the chain is therefore degenerative and vulnerable to disruptions. On the other hand, a regionalized circular service model, because of its circularity, the model would be closed-looped, characterized by low carbon emissions and low externalities, redesigning a resilient and regenerative circular service network would be challenging. However, the only way to ascertain a sustainable future is to embark on a highly differentiated and inspirational journey. For that, if the future were an extension of our past, when the future arrives, we are likely to be most disappointed. The CC4CC Dialogues and Initiatives will create a brand new space for innovative and inspiring discussions and collaborations amongst nations and between companies with shared goals and ambition to mitigate the climate crisis. It will be a breath of fresh air, filled with new opportunity to replace the already dated linear economic model with the new circular economic model. With this, let me thank you again for your time. Enjoy your stay in Scotland and wish you a productive COP26 experience. Thank you for joining us on Taiwan's Day.